There are silences more dangerous than screams. A woman's body can smile, touch, even kiss, while her soul is quietly starving. Sexual dissatisfaction is rarely spoken of, yet it is one of the strongest forces shaping hidden emotions, behaviors, and choices. Behind polite laughter, behind perfectly staged photos, and behind a calm, "I am fine," there can be an emptiness so deep it begins to shape the very core of a woman's psychology. This silence is not simply about unmet desires. It is about feeling unseen, untouched, and unvalued. A woman who does not feel satisfied in intimacy often begins to live two lives, the one she shows to the world, and the one she hides inside her own thoughts. Over time, her body speaks in quiet rebellions, withdrawn affection, restless eyes, or sudden coldness that cannot be explained. Dark psychology shows us that these signals are never random. They are the whispers of an unmet need, the shadows of suppressed desire, and the cracks in a relationship's foundation. If you pay attention to these silent signs, you will see the truth long before the words are ever spoken. The question is, are you willing to notice? A woman may sit across from you, smiling politely, her hands folded gracefully, her words measured and calm. Yet beneath that stillness there can exist an invisible storm. Sexual dissatisfaction is not always a dramatic confession. It rarely arrives as an argument or a loud declaration. Instead, it lives quietly, pressing itself into the spaces between words, into the silences after conversations, and into the pauses that grow longer every night. This silence becomes a psychological weight, heavy enough to bend her emotions and alter her perception of herself. When a basic human need is neglected, it does not simply vanish. It hides. Freud once said that repressed desires never die, they only return in other forms. For a woman, that return may show up as restlessness, sudden irritation, or even a vague sadness that she cannot fully explain. She may not even connect these feelings to her unfulfilled intimacy, because society has taught her to endure, to remain quiet, and to prioritize appearances over inner truth. Carl Jung believed that the unconscious always seeks expression. If it is ignored, it will break through in dreams, in fantasies, or in subtle behaviors that escape control. A woman who feels unseen in intimacy might suddenly begin to daydream of strangers, might develop unexplained insomnia, or might lose interest in the very relationship she once nurtured. Her dissatisfaction becomes an invisible cage, and every day inside it chips away at her self-worth. This is not only about the act itself. It is about recognition, connection, and validation. When intimacy feels hollow, a woman begins to question her desirability, her femininity, even her value as a partner. The psychological weight is doubled, because she is not only missing satisfaction, she is also carrying silent self-doubt. Over time, this internal conflict hardens into a quiet resentment, one that spreads like a shadow over every interaction. The tragedy is that many men misinterpret these signals. They see distance as moodiness, or silence as disinterest, never realizing that these are symptoms of a deeper unmet need. It is easier to dismiss her withdrawal than to confront the uncomfortable possibility that she is not fulfilled. Yet avoidance does not erase truth. In fact, it deepens the fracture. The woman herself may feel trapped between guilt and longing. She tells herself that she should be grateful, that there are worse problems in the world, but the emptiness does not leave. At night, when everything is quiet, it presses harder, whispering questions she cannot silence. Why do I feel incomplete? Why do I feel invisible? Why do I feel untouched, even when I am touched? The mind is clever at hiding pain, but the body is not. Unspoken dissatisfaction begins to leak into posture, into tone of voice, into the smallest micro-expressions. It becomes a silent scream, waiting for someone who is brave enough to listen. A woman who feels unsatisfied does not announce it with a speech. Instead, her behaviors begin to shift in ways so subtle that they are often ignored. These changes may look ordinary on the surface, but beneath them lies a deeper story of emptiness. She may laugh less, her eyes may wander more, and her presence in the room may feel thinner, as if her mind is living somewhere else. One of the earliest signs appears in touch. Where once her hands reached for yours without hesitation, now there is a pause. The touch becomes lighter, shorter, almost mechanical. She may still lean in during conversations, but her body does not fully surrender to the moment. This withdrawal is not always conscious, it is her unconscious protecting itself from the disappointment of unmet needs. Each time she avoids closeness, she is protecting herself from another reminder of what she does not feel. Communication also begins to change. Conversations grow shorter, not because she has nothing to say, but because she feels unheard in the places that matter most. A woman who is dissatisfied often avoids vulnerable topics, because they remind her of what she lacks. Instead, she may redirect her energy into work, friendships, or hobbies, appearing busy but secretly avoiding the silence that intimacy demands. This is not escape for joy, it is escape for survival. Her gaze becomes a mirror of her inner emptiness. Restless eyes scan the world as if searching for something unnamed. She may begin to notice details she once ignored, compliments from strangers, the presence of others who seem more attentive, or even characters in movies who embody the passion she secretly craves. These observations are not evidence of betrayal, but of hunger. Hunger that her relationship no longer feeds. Small irritations grow larger. The way you speak, the way you move, the habits she once overlooked, suddenly they carry weight. This is not because you have changed, but because her patience has thinned. When inner needs are unmet, the mind projects dissatisfaction onto external details. Freud called this displacement, redirecting inner frustration onto safer targets. She may seem short-tempered, but beneath the irritation lies sadness. Sleep can also reveal the cracks. A woman who cannot rest beside her partner without a sense of fulfillment often turns her body away in the night. Her back becomes a wall, her silence a barrier. She may fall asleep late, scrolling endlessly on her phone, chasing distraction to escape the echo of what is missing. Even in dreams, her unconscious rebels, producing vivid fantasies or restless nights. The danger lies in how easy it is to dismiss these changes as normal mood swings. But when small behaviors accumulate, less laughter, colder touch, distracted eyes, shorter words, they form a silent language of dissatisfaction. And that language, if ignored, grows louder until it finds an outlet far beyond control. When desire is suppressed for too long, it does not remain silent. It begins to reshape the very identity of the person carrying it. A woman who feels chronically unsatisfied does not simply experience physical emptiness, she experiences a slow erosion of self. Each unmet moment becomes a mirror that reflects back not only the absence of passion, but also questions about who she is and what she is worth. At first, the changes are subtle. She might doubt her own attractiveness. She may stare at herself in the mirror longer than before, searching for flaws, trying to understand why she feels invisible. She asks silently, "Is something wrong with me?" This self-interrogation eats away at confidence, creating a gap between how she appears and how she feels inside. Even if others compliment her beauty, her mind refuses to accept it, because her body does not feel validated in the place that matters most. Nietzsche once wrote that what does not find expression within us turns against us. This is painfully true for suppressed desire. When a woman cannot release her needs openly, those needs coil inward, transforming into anxiety, self-blame, and quiet despair. Her laughter becomes more forced, her spirit more guarded, and her sense of femininity begins to fracture. Identity is not fixed, it is fluid, shaped by relationships, experiences, and inner validation. A woman who feels fully desired radiates a natural ease, a confidence that is unshakable. But when intimacy becomes an empty ritual, her inner compass shifts. She may redefine herself as less feminine, less worthy, even less alive. This distorted identity can push her into extremes, overcompensating with perfection in work, obsessing over appearance, or withdrawing completely into numbness. The emotional consequences are equally severe. Suppressed desire does not vanish into silence, it transforms into subtle sadness, mood swings, or unexplained emotional outbursts. She may cry without knowing why, or grow restless in situations where she once felt comfortable. This is the unconscious mind crying for attention, signaling that something essential is missing. Even her relationship with others changes. Friends may notice her energy is different, that she is either too distant or too eager for validation. She might become more sensitive to criticism, because her self-worth is already fragile. Or she may retreat, building emotional walls so high that even those who care for her cannot climb over. The reshaping of identity under sexual dissatisfaction is one of the most dangerous patterns, because it does not remain confined to the bedroom. It bleeds into every corner of her life: how she speaks, how she carries herself, how she trusts, and how she loves. She becomes a shadow of her own potential, silently mourning a part of herself that still longs to be awakened. If this silent reshaping continues unaddressed, it begins to feed destructive patterns that threaten not just her inner world, but the very fabric of her relationships. When dissatisfaction is buried long enough, it does not stay hidden. It begins to poison the soil of the relationship itself. What once felt warm and nurturing turns fragile, unpredictable, and strained. Love is not destroyed in a single dramatic moment. It decays slowly, through small patterns that grow sharper with time, patterns that often go unnoticed until they are too deep to undo. The first destructive pattern is emotional withdrawal. A woman who feels unseen in intimacy starts to protect herself by pulling back from emotional closeness as well. Her laughter becomes rarer, her confessions shorter, her secrets deeper. She learns to keep parts of herself hidden, because revealing them no longer feels safe. The relationship becomes less of a union and more of a polite coexistence. Both partners live under the same roof, yet their souls occupy separate worlds. Then comes resentment. Every unmet need, every ignored signal, every silent night becomes a stone added to the pile. At first she tries to suppress it, but over time the stones grow heavy, and she begins to carry them into daily life. Small disagreements suddenly ignite into larger conflicts. A forgotten chore, a careless word, or a moment of neglect becomes fuel for an anger that has been simmering for years. What appears to be about the dishes or the schedule is really about the unspoken void between them. Infidelity often grows in the cracks of dissatisfaction. Not because a woman is immoral, but because their hunger to be seen and desired can push her into dangerous directions. Sometimes this manifests as emotional infidelity, sharing thoughts, feelings, or secret fantasies with someone outside the relationship. Other times it becomes physical, not out of cruelty, but out of desperation for the validation she can no longer find at home. When Freud said that desire, when unmet, finds its own pathway, he was speaking about this exact rebellion. Even when she does not seek another partner, her mind may create fantasies that serve as temporary escape. These fantasies become a private refuge, a world where she is wanted fully. Yet the more she lives in this inner world, the less she invests in the relationship she already has. Slowly, her partner becomes a stranger, present in the room but absent in her imagination. Another destructive pattern is emotional numbness. Sometimes dissatisfaction does not explode outward in arguments or infidelity. Instead, it collapses inward. She stops fighting, stops expecting, stops hoping. She accepts a version of life that feels lifeless, and the relationship turns into a quiet arrangement rather than a living bond. On the surface, everything looks fine: no fights, no drama, but underneath, love has frozen into silence. These destructive patterns are not born of hatred. They are born of longing unmet, year after year. If left unspoken, they do not just harm intimacy, they erode trust, closeness, and the very idea of partnership itself. A bond without fulfillment becomes a contract of survival, not a story of love. Healing begins the moment silence is broken. A woman who has carried the weight of dissatisfaction for too long often feels trapped between shame and longing, but the truth is that emptiness cannot be cured by endurance. It can only be transformed by awareness. The first step is naming what has been left unnamed. To say, even in trembling words, "I feel unseen, I feel untouched, I feel incomplete." This confession is not weakness. It is an act of courage. For the partner, hearing such words is never easy. It can feel like accusation, rejection, even failure. But if he listens not with defensiveness but with presence, he will discover that dissatisfaction is not about blame, it is about connection. She does not need perfection. She needs to be felt, not just physically, but emotionally, mentally, spiritually. Real intimacy is not measured by technique or frequency, but by presence, the ability to be fully there in a moment, without distraction, without ego. Healing also requires honesty with oneself. A woman must learn to separate her worth from her satisfaction. She is not less feminine because she feels unfulfilled, nor less valuable because her desires remain unmet. Her body is not broken, her soul is not unworthy. She is simply human, carrying a need as ancient as life itself. Jung once wrote that the unlived life within us cries out for recognition. That cry is not shameful. It is sacred. But awareness alone is not enough. Patterns must change. Relationships demand conscious effort, time, vulnerability, and the willingness to confront discomfort. Too often, couples avoid the awkward conversation, choosing silence over truth. Yet silence builds walls, while truth opens doors. Healing requires tearing down those walls brick by brick, until both partners stand exposed, raw, and ready to rebuild. For some, healing means rediscovering the small things. Touch without expectation. Words that affirm. Eye contact that lingers. Rediscovering each other as if meeting for the first time. For others, it may require deeper exploration, therapy, education, or guided conversations about intimacy. What matters most is their willingness to confront the shadows instead of pretending they do not exist. Even in the darkest silence, fulfillment is possible. But it cannot be handed over by one partner alone. It must be built by two souls willing to see, to feel, and to risk vulnerability. Love without vulnerability is performance. Love with vulnerability is truth. And perhaps that is the deepest lesson: dissatisfaction is not an ending, it is a signal. A call to awaken what has been sleeping, to ignite what has gone cold, to rediscover the fire that once burned silently between two hearts. Those who dare to listen to this signal may not only heal intimacy, they may find themselves transformed, alive in a way they never thought possible.